I was rummaging through Grandma Edna's old cedar chest, the one she kept in the attic under a heap of dusty quilts. The attic was hot and musty, filled with the scent of aged wood and forgotten memories. I had volunteered to help clean out her things, partly to escape the tension downstairs and partly because I always loved the stories hidden in her treasures. As I lifted a faded quilt, a small envelope slipped out and fluttered to the floor. My heart did a little flip. The envelope was addressed to me in Grandma Edna's elegant handwriting. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of its potential contents pressing down on me. Then, with a deep breath, I tore it open. Inside was a letter, written in her usual neat script. I started reading, and with each line, my world shifted. "Dear Harper," it began, "I have watched you grow into a strong and capable woman, often overshadowed by your brother's achievements. Know that I see you, and I value you for who you are. I have decided to leave you the family heirlooms, the ones you always admired. They are yours, my dear, to cherish and protect." I had to sit down, my legs suddenly weak. Grandma Edna's words were like a balm to my soul, but they also set off a storm of emotions. I knew how much those heirlooms meant to Bryce, how he assumed they would be his, just like everything else. This letter was a game changer, a secret that could tilt the delicate balance of our family dynamics. "Harper." My mother's voice floated up the stairs, jolting me back to reality. "Are you coming down for dinner?" "Yeah, just a minute." I called back, folding the letter and slipping it into my pocket. I needed time to process this, to figure out what it meant for me and for us. Downstairs, the usual scene unfolded. My brother Bryce, the golden child, was regaling our parents with tales of his latest triumph at the bank, his voice dripping with the confidence of someone who knew they were adored. My parents, Lorraine and Gerald, hung on his every word, their faces alight with pride. I slid into my seat at the table, trying to mask the turmoil brewing inside me. "Hey, Harper," Bryce said with that easy grin of his. "How's the event planning going? Any big gigs coming up?" "It's good," I replied, keeping my tone light. "I'm working on a charity gala for next month. Should be a big deal." "That's nice," my mother said, her attention already drifting back to Bryce. "You know, Bryce, you should invite some of your clients. They'd love a good charity event." I clenched my fork a little tighter, forcing a smile. "Yeah, maybe." Dinner continued in the same vein, with Bryce as the star of the show. But the letter burned a hole in my pocket, a constant reminder of the secret I now held. As the conversation flowed around me, I couldn't help but wonder how things would change once the truth came out. After dinner, I excused myself and headed to my room, the letter weighing heavily on my mind. I paced the floor, trying to make sense of it all. Part of me wanted to confront Bryce, to throw the letter in his face and watch his smug confidence crumble. But another part of me hesitated, not wanting to upset the fragile peace in our family. I thought of Grandma Edna, her kind eyes and gentle smile. She had always been my anchor, the one who saw me for who I truly was. Her decision to leave the heirlooms to me felt like a validation I'd been craving for years. But it also came with a responsibility I wasn't sure I was ready to shoulder. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The letter was a catalyst, a spark that would ignite a fire I couldn't yet understand. I didn't know where this path would lead, but I knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. And with that thought, I drifted into a restless sleep, the promise of change hanging in the air like a storm on the horizon. The morning after finding Grandma Edna's letter, I woke up with a sense of determination. It was time to confront the favoritism that had been a shadow over my life for too long. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror, noticing the resolve in my eyes. Today was the day I would speak up. Downstairs, the kitchen was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the chatter of my parents. Bryce was already at the table, scrolling through his phone. My parents sat across from him, their attention fully absorbed in whatever story he was spinning today. "Morning," I said, sliding into a chair. "Morning, Harper," my father, Gerald, replied, barely looking up. "Bryce was just telling us about a new client he landed. Sounds impressive." "Yeah, it's a big deal," Bryce said with a smug smile, not missing a beat, could lead to some major opportunities. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. That's great, Bryce. But I've been thinking. My mother, Lorraine, looked up, her expression curious. About what, dear? About how things are around here. How it feels like Bryce's achievements always overshadow mine, no matter what I do. There it was, out in the open. My heart raced as I waited for their reaction. Bryce smirked, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, surprise, maybe. Come on, Harper. You know it's not like that, isn't it? I challenged, my voice steady. I'm working hard too, and I've accomplished a lot in my own right. But it never seems to matter. My father frowned, setting down his coffee mug. Harper, we're proud of you. But Bryce's work is just different. Different? I echoed, frustration bubbling up. Or is it just more important to you because it fits your idea of success? Lorraine sighed, her expression softening slightly. We don't mean to make you feel that way, Harper. It's just. Bryce has always been so driven. And I'm not? I shot back, feeling the sting of their words. I've been working tirelessly too, but it's like you only see him. The tension in the room was palpable, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then Bryce leaned back, crossing his arms. Look, Harper, maybe you're just taking things too personally. I stared at him, incredulous. Too personally? This isn't just about me, Bryce. It's about fairness, about being seen. My father's jaw tightened. This isn't the time for this discussion. We're all just trying to do our best. Exactly, I said, standing up. And maybe it's time you started seeing my best too. I left the kitchen, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and relief. I had finally said what I needed to, but it didn't change the fact that I felt more isolated than ever. As I walked outside to clear my head, I spotted Grandma Edna's garden, a small oasis of calm and color. Her presence was almost tangible there, like she was whispering encouragement in the rustling leaves. Later that day, I was at work, trying to focus on the details of the upcoming gala. The event was my chance to prove myself, to step out of Bryce's shadow and into my own light. But my mind kept drifting back to the morning's confrontation. As I reviewed the guest list, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Curious, I opened it. Harper, it's Bryce. Can we talk? I think we need to clear the air. I hesitated, the memory of his dismissive tone still fresh. But curiosity got the better of me. Maybe there was more to this than I realized. We met at a nearby cafe, the kind of place Bryce usually avoided for its lack of sophistication. He was already there, looking uncharacteristically tense. Thanks for coming, he said as I sat down. What's this about, Bryce? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing around before leaning in. Look, I know things have been tense between us. And I get why you're upset. But there's something you should know. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite myself. What is it? He hesitated, his usual confidence faltering. I'm in a bit of a bind, Harper. Financially. Things aren't as rosy as they seem. I blinked, taken aback by the admission. Bryce, the golden boy, in trouble? It was almost unthinkable. Why are you telling me this? Because I need help, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. And because I know you're the only one who might actually listen. The revelation hung in the air between us, a new twist in our complicated relationship. As I looked at Bryce, I saw not just my brother, but a man struggling with his own demons. It was a moment that changed everything, adding layers to my understanding of him and deepening the conflict I faced. I left the cafe with more questions than answers, the path ahead more uncertain than ever. But one thing was clear, the story was far from over. The days following my conversation with Bryce were a whirlwind of emotions and unexpected revelations. I couldn't shake the feeling that our family was perched on the edge of a precipice, ready to tumble into chaos at any moment. Bryce's confession about his financial troubles had opened a Pandora's box of questions and uncertainties. One afternoon, as I was finalizing details for the charity gala, I found myself distracted by the memory of Bryce's plea for help. His vulnerability had been so raw, so unlike the confident facade he usually wore. But as much as I wanted to help him, a part of me felt vindicated. Bryce, the untouchable, was finally facing the consequences of his actions. Later that week, I was at the family home, ostensibly to discuss some last-minute arrangements for the gala with my mother. Lorraine was in the living room, flipping through a stack of magazines, her mind clearly elsewhere. "Mom, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. She looked up, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "Of course, Harper. What's on your mind?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "It's about Bryce. Have you noticed anything off with him lately?" Her brow furrowed slightly. "Off? What do you mean?" I sighed, deciding to take a leap. "I think he's in some kind of trouble. Financial trouble." She blinked, her expression shifting from confusion to concern. "Bryce? Are you sure?" "Pretty sure," I replied, watching her reaction closely. "He mentioned something to me the other day. I think he might need help." Lorraine's face softened, but there was a flicker of something else there too, denial, maybe. "Bryce has always been so responsible. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." I wanted to shake her, to make her see the truth. But I held back, knowing it wasn't the time for that battle. "Maybe, but I think we should keep an eye on him, just in case." As I left the room, I couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration. My parents' blind faith in Bryce was like a fortress, impenetrable and unwavering. But the cracks were starting to show, and it was only a matter of time before the walls came down. The next day, I was back at the office, preparing for a meeting with the gala sponsors. My phone buzzed with a message from Bryce, asking if we could meet again. I agreed, curious to see what he had to say. We met at a quiet park, away from prying eyes and ears. Bryce looked more haggard than before, the weight of his troubles clearly taking a toll. "Thanks for coming, Harper," he said, his voice subdued. "What's going on, Bryce?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "You look like you haven't slept in days." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from our childhood. "It's bad, Harper. Worse than I let on. I'm in over my head and I don't know how to fix it." I crossed my arms, trying to process his words. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Or Mom and Dad?" "Because I'm supposed to be the one who has it all together," he replied, a bitter edge to his voice. I didn't want to disappoint them or Tessa. I sighed, feeling a mix of sympathy and exasperation. "Bryce, you can't keep hiding this. It's only going to get worse." He nodded, his expression pained. "I know. But what do I do?" In that moment, I realized that despite everything, Bryce was still my brother. And maybe, just maybe, helping him was the right thing to do. "You need to come clean, Bryce. To Tessa, to Mom and Dad. It's the only way to start fixing this." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a vulnerability I had never seen before. "What if they hate me for it?" "They won't," I said softly. "But they need to know the truth." As we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had taken a step toward helping Bryce, but I knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. Later that evening, as I was wrapping up my day, an unexpected email popped into my inbox. It was from the gala's main sponsor, expressing concerns about Bryce's involvement due to rumors of his financial instability. My heart sank. The crisis was escalating faster than I had anticipated, threatening not just Bryce's reputation but my own hard work. I realized then that the stakes were higher than I had imagined. This wasn't just about Bryce's financial woes or my quest for recognition. It was about the very fabric of our family and the choices we made in the face of adversity. As I sat there, staring at the screen, I knew I had to act. The time for passivity was over. It was time to confront the truth, no matter the cost. The charity gala was just days away, and the pressure was mounting. I was in the middle of a final walkthrough at the venue, checking details and making sure everything was on track. The ballroom was a hive of activity, with caterers setting up tables and decorators arranging flowers. But my mind was elsewhere, caught in the tangled web of family drama that seemed to be spiraling out of control. Just as I was reviewing the seating arrangements, my phone buzzed with a call from Tessa. It was unusual for her to reach out directly, and my stomach twisted with apprehension as I answered. "Hey, Tessa," I said, trying to sound casual. "Harper, can we talk?" Her voice was tense, a far cry from her usual bubbly tone. It's about Bryce. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Sure, what's going on? Something's not right, she said, her words rushing out. He's been acting strange, and I found some overdue notices in his office. I'm worried. I hesitated, torn between loyalty to my brother and the urge to protect Tessa from the fallout. Tessa, I think you should talk to Bryce. He needs to be honest with you about what's happening. There was a pause, and I could almost hear her processing my words. So there is something going on? I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Yes, but it's not my place to say. He needs to tell you himself. Thank you, Harper, she said softly, her voice tinged with gratitude and fear. After the call, I felt a knot of tension settle in my chest. The truth was closing in, and I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came to a head. As I headed back to my office, I couldn't shake the feeling that the ground beneath us was shifting. Later that evening, I was at home, trying to unwind with a glass of wine when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Bryce standing there, looking more disheveled than ever. Can I come in? He asked, his voice weary. I stepped aside, letting him in. What's going on, Bryce? He sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. I talked to Tessa, told her everything. I sat down across from him, watching his face for clues. How did she take it? He let out a shaky breath. Not great. She's hurt and angry, and I don't blame her. But she said she needs time to think. I nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. At least you were honest with her. That's a start. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of desperation and gratitude. Thanks for pushing me to do it, Harper. I don't know what's going to happen, but at least I'm not hiding anymore. As we sat there, a sense of uneasy calm settled over us. The truth was out, but the consequences were still unfolding. I couldn't help but wonder how this would affect the gala and my own standing with the sponsors. The next day, as I was preparing for a meeting with the gala committee, I received an unexpected email from Lorraine. It was short and to the point, asking me to come by the house for a family meeting. My heart sank, knowing this was likely about Bryce's situation and the impact it was having on all of us. That evening, I arrived at the family home to find my parents waiting in the living room. The atmosphere was tense, charged with unspoken words and simmering emotions. Harper, we need to talk, my father said, gesturing for me to sit. I took a seat, bracing myself for what was to come. Is this about Bryce? Lorraine nodded, her expression conflicted. We're worried about him. And we're worried about you too, with the gala and everything. I met their gaze, feeling a surge of determination. I know things are complicated right now, but I'm handling it. The gala is going to be a success, and Bryce will find his way through this. Gerald sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. We just want to make sure everyone is okay. I nodded, understanding their concern, but also feeling a newfound resolve. We will be. But we need to face the truth and support each other, even if it's hard. As the conversation continued, I realized that this was a turning point for all of us. The crisis had forced us to confront our flaws and fears, but it had also opened the door to healing and growth. As I left the house that night, I felt a sense of clarity. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face whatever came next. The themes of revenge and protection had evolved into something deeper, an understanding that true strength came from facing the truth and standing by those you love, even when the path was fraught with challenges. The day of the charity gala dawned with a sense of anticipation and dread. The venue was buzzing with last-minute preparations, and I was in the thick of it, directing staff and making sure everything was perfect. This event was my chance to prove myself, to step out of Bryce's shadow once and for all. But the weight of family drama loomed large, threatening to overshadow my hard work. As guests began to arrive, I moved through the crowd, greeting attendees and ensuring everything was running smoothly. The gala was a dazzling affair, with elegantly dressed patrons mingling under the soft glow of chandeliers. Yet, beneath the glittering surface, I felt a simmering tension, as if everything could unravel at a moment's notice. In the midst of the festivities, I spotted Bryce and Tessa entering the ballroom. Bryce looked polished, but there was a tightness around his eyes, a sign of the strain he was under. Tessa, on the other hand, wore a mask of composure, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Harper," Bryce called, making his way over with Tessa in tow. "Hey, you too," I replied, trying to sound upbeat. "Glad you could make it." Tessa nodded, her expression unreadable. "It's a beautiful event, Harper. You've done an amazing job." "Thanks," I said, feeling a flicker of pride despite the tension. "I'm glad you think so." Bryce glanced around, his gaze lingering on the crowd. "This is quite the turnout." "Yeah, it is," I agreed, sensing there was more he wanted to say. Before he could continue, Lorraine and Gerald joined us, their presence adding another layer of complexity to the gathering. My parents exchanged pleasantries with Bryce and Tessa, but there was an undercurrent of unease in their interactions. As the evening progressed, I found myself moving from one task to another, my mind racing with thoughts of the impending reading of Grandma Edna's will. It was a pivotal moment that could change everything, and the uncertainty gnawed at me. Later, as I was checking on the catering staff, I overheard a snippet of conversation that stopped me in my tracks. Two guests were discussing Bryce, their voices low but clear enough to catch the gist. "Heard he's in deep financial trouble," one of them said. "Apparently, it's affecting his work." "Really?" the other replied, sounding intrigued. "I thought he was doing well." "Not according to the latest rumors. It's all starting to come out now." My heart sank, the weight of their words pressing down on me. Bryce's struggles were becoming public knowledge, and the fallout was spreading. I knew this would only complicate things further, adding another layer of pressure to an already volatile situation. As the night wore on, I felt the strain of keeping everything together. The gala was a success on the surface, but beneath it all, I was teetering on the edge of a breaking point. The truth was closing in, and I knew I couldn't keep running from it. Finally, as the last of the guests departed and the venue began to empty, I found myself alone with Bryce. The room was quiet, the echoes of the evening still lingering in the air. "Harper," Bryce said, his voice breaking the silence. "I need to know. What are you going to do about the will?" I looked at him, seeing the desperation in his eyes. "I don't know, Bryce. I haven't decided yet." He nodded, his expression a mix of hope and fear. I don't want to lose everything." I sighed, feeling the weight of his words. "I know. But this isn't just about you, Bryce. It's about all of us." As we stood there, the enormity of the situation hit me. The will, the family dynamics, Bryce's financial troubles, it was all coming to a head, and I had to make a choice. The path forward was unclear, but I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. In that moment, I realized that my perception of justice and revenge was shifting. It wasn't just about settling scores or proving myself. It was about finding a way to navigate the complexities of family and responsibility, to make choices that aligned with my values and the legacy Grandma Edna had left for me. As I left the venue, the cool night air hit my face, a reminder of the challenges ahead. The road was uncertain, but I was ready to face it, to find a way through the tangled mess of our lives and emerge stronger on the other side. The day of Grandma Edna's will reading arrived with a sense of ominous finality. The family gathered in the old parlor, a room filled with memories and the scent of aged furniture. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the floor, but the atmosphere was anything but serene. I sat next to Bryce, who looked as though he hadn't slept in days. His usual confidence was replaced by a palpable anxiety, his leg bouncing nervously as we waited for the lawyer to begin. Lorraine and Gerald sat across from us, their expressions a mix of anticipation and unease. This was the moment we had all been dreading, the moment that could redefine everything. The lawyer, a stern-looking man in a crisp suit, cleared his throat and began to read. The room was silent except for the rustle of paper and the occasional creak of the old house settling around us. As he read through Grandma Edna's wishes, I felt the tension in the room coil tighter with each word. Finally, he reached the part about the family heirlooms. My heart pounded as he announced that they were to be left to me, not Bryce. The room seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with shock and disbelief. Bryce turned to me, his face a mask of betrayal. "Harper, how could you?" he whispered, his voice barely audible but laced with accusation. I shook my head, my own emotions a tumultuous mix of guilt and vindication. "I didn't know, Bryce. I swear." Lorraine's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Why would she do this, Harper? You must have known." "I didn't," I insisted, feeling the weight of their accusations like a physical blow. "I only found out after she passed. I would never." Gerald's voice cut through my protest. "This isn't right. Bryce has always been the one to carry on the family legacy." The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, each one louder and more desperate than the last. I felt myself sinking into the chaos, the accusations swirling around me like a storm. It was as if the foundation of our family was crumbling, and I was powerless to stop it. In the midst of the turmoil, Bryce stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. "I can't believe this," he said, his voice breaking. "You were supposed to be on my side, Harper." I rose to my feet, my own anger flaring. "I've always been on your side, Bryce. But this isn't about sides. It's about what Grandma wanted." He shook his head, his expression one of deep hurt. "I can't do this," he said, turning and leaving the room abruptly. The silence that followed his departure was deafening. I felt hollow, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. My family was fractured, and I didn't know how to fix it. Later, as I sat alone in the garden, the enormity of the day settled over me. The heirlooms, the legacy, the broken bonds, it was all too much. I felt as though I was standing at the edge of a precipice, the ground crumbling beneath my feet. The sound of footsteps on the gravel path drew my attention. It was Lorraine, her expression softer now, but still tinged with sadness. "Harper," she began, sitting beside me on the stone bench. "I know this isn't easy for you." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "Your grandmother loved you very much," she continued, her voice gentle. "She saw something in you that maybe we've overlooked." I looked at her, surprised by her words. "I don't know what to do, Mom. I didn't ask for any of this." She sighed, her gaze distant. "None of us did. But maybe it's time we start seeing each other for who we really are, not who we expect each other to be." Her words hung in the air, a fragile bridge over the chasm that had opened between us. It was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the garden in a warm glow, I realized that the path forward wouldn't be easy. But maybe, just maybe, there was a way to rebuild, to find a new kind of balance in the chaos. The themes of revenge and justice had shifted once again, morphing into something deeper, an understanding that true strength came from facing the truth, even when it was painful. As I sat there, I knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to face them, one step at a time. The air was thick with tension as I approached the family home, the weight of the impending confrontation pressing down on me. After the will reading, things had spiraled out of control, and Bryce's financial troubles had become the talk of the town. It was time to face the storm head-on. I found Bryce in the living room, pacing like a caged animal. His usually immaculate suit was rumpled, and his eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. He stopped when he saw me, a flicker of defiance in his gaze. "Harper," he said, his voice a mix of accusation and desperation. "I thought you were supposed to have my back." "I do, Bryce," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "But you need to face the truth." He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Truth? What truth?" "That I'm a failure." I took a step closer, meeting his gaze. "No, that you're human. That you've made mistakes, but you can still fix them." He looked away, his jaw clenched. "It's not that simple." "Maybe not," I conceded, feeling the weight of his struggle. "But running from it won't help." Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Tessa appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of hurt and determination. "Bryce," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We need to talk." He stiffened, glancing between us. "Tessa, No," she interrupted, her voice firm. "I've listened long enough. It's time you listen." I moved to leave, giving them space, but Bryce caught my arm. "Stay, Harper. Please." I nodded, staying rooted as Tessa stepped forward. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her resolve was clear. "Bryce, I love you, but I can't do this alone," she said, her voice steady. "You need to be honest. With me, with yourself." He hesitated, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "I'm scared, Tessa." She softened, reaching out to him. "I know, but we can face this together." I watched as Bryce's defenses crumbled, his vulnerability laid bare. It was a moment of raw honesty, a turning point in the tangled web of our lives. As they talked, I felt a shift within myself. The themes of revenge and justice that had driven me were evolving into something deeper, a desire for healing and understanding. When their conversation ended, Bryce turned to me, his expression a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "Harper, I'm sorry. For everything." I nodded, feeling a sense of peace. "We'll figure it out. Together." But just as it seemed the storm was passing, the door swung open and Lorraine and Gerald entered, their faces etched with worry. "What's going on?" Gerald demanded, his gaze shifting between us. Bryce took a deep breath, stepping forward. "I'm in trouble, Dad. Financial trouble." Lorraine's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "Bryce, why didn't you tell us?" "Because I didn't want to disappoint you," he admitted, his voice breaking. Gerald's expression softened, a mix of anger and love. "We're your family, Bryce. We're here to help." As the truth settled over us, I felt the tension in the room begin to dissipate. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. The unexpected twist came when Lorraine turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "Harper, I'm sorry. We've been so focused on Bryce that we've overlooked you." Her words were a balm to my soul, a validation I hadn't realized I needed. "Thank you, Mom." In that moment, I understood that the core themes of our story, revenge, justice, and family, were intertwined in ways I hadn't fully grasped. The path to healing was fraught with challenges, but it was a journey worth taking. As the sun set outside, casting the room in a warm glow, I felt a sense of hope. The confrontation had brought us face to face with our truths, and while the road ahead was uncertain, we were ready to walk it together. The climax had tested us all, but it had also revealed the strength of our bonds. And as I looked around at my family, I knew that we would find a way forward, one step at a time. In the days following the confrontation, a quiet transformation began to unfold within our family. It was as if the storm had cleared, leaving behind a landscape ripe for rebuilding. Bryce had taken the first steps toward redemption, opening up to Tessa and beginning to untangle the financial mess he'd found himself in. It wasn't easy, but it was a start. I watched from the sidelines, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't expected. My own journey had been tumultuous, filled with moments of doubt and anger, but I had emerged stronger, more certain of who I was and what I wanted. One afternoon, I found myself back in Grandma Edna's garden, a place that had always been a refuge. The air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers, and the sun cast a warm glow over the neatly tended rows. As I knelt to pull a few weeds, my fingers brushed against something hard and unexpected. Curious, I dug a little deeper and unearthed a small, weathered box. Inside, I found a letter addressed to me in Grandma Edna's familiar handwriting. My heart skipped a beat as I unfolded the paper, her words a balm to my soul. "Dear Harper," it began, "I've watched you grow with pride and love. You have a strength and resilience that will guide you through life's challenges. Remember, true validation comes from within, not from the approval of others. Live authentically, my dear, and know that you are cherished." I sat back on my heels, letting her words wash over me. It was as if she had known I would need this reminder, this encouragement to embrace my own path. Her belief in me was a gift, one that I would carry with me always. As I tucked the letter back into the box, I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up to see Lorraine, her expression soft and open. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Of course not," I replied, gesturing for her to sit beside me. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the garden a peaceful cocoon around us. Finally, Lorraine spoke, her words thoughtful and sincere. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, Harper. about seeing each other for who we really are. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. It's not always easy, but it's important. She sighed, a small smile playing on her lips. I'm proud of you, for everything you've accomplished and for standing up for yourself. Her admission warmed me, a balm to the lingering wounds of the past. Thank you, Mom. That means a lot. As we sat there, I realized that our family's journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt and struggle, but we were learning to navigate them together with honesty and understanding. The resolution to our story wasn't perfect, but it was real. Bryce was finding his way, Tessa by his side, and our family was slowly mending the fractures that had once seemed insurmountable. As I rose to leave the garden, a thought struck me, a lingering question that added a layer of complexity to our newfound peace. What if Grandma Edna had left the heirlooms to me not just as a gift, but as a challenge? A challenge to step into my own power, to embrace the legacy she had entrusted to me. It was a question that would linger, a reminder that growth and understanding were ongoing journeys. But as I walked back toward the house, I felt ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that I was enough, just as I was. The themes of revenge and justice had evolved into something richer, a tapestry of forgiveness, resilience, and love. And as I stepped into the warmth of the house, I knew that whatever the future held, I was ready to meet it head-on. Surrounded by the strength of family and the enduring legacy of those who had come before.